Horae Apocalypticae, Volume 1, an historicist commentary on the Revelation, updated and revised for the 21st century, derived from the original work of E.B. Elliott, updated, revised, and read by yours truly, Nicholas Arthur. Introduction to the Prophecy of the Future. Chapter 5, on the ensuing historical exposition of the Revelation. And now, as to the conclusion of this introductory part, let us consider the principles, plan, and evidence of truth that may be found to characterize the following exposition of the apocalyptic prophecy. Its subject matter, I perceive, to be primarily the continuous fortunes of the Church and of the world, that is, of the Roman world and Christian Church settled therein, from the time of the revelation being given, or time of St. John's banishment, to the end of all things. This, its commencing date, I consider, as already observed, to have been fixed by Christ's own words. I will show thee things that must happen after these things. If the words "these things" means the present state at the time of the apocalyptic churches, as described in the 7 epistles, a point which, I suppose, few will doubt, then must Christ's declaration, as it seems to me, distinctly and necessarily imply that the future foreshown should begin from the present time of John's banishment, or soon thereafter. This is indeed admitted by most competent judges, and the importance of this principle on historical exposition of the apocalypse, thus being fixed as to its commencement, cannot be overestimated. It sets aside of itself what there is indeed, as I think, superabundant other so-called evidence, interpretations based on the principle of the apocalypse being a prophecy figurative only of the times yet future of the second advent. I believe the Greek must have positive violence done to it in order to extract therefrom any other meaning than that which I here offer. In the divine foreshowing of its great subject, I am persuaded, and have carried out my exposition on the persuasion, that the 2 following rules must be observed. First, that the epochs and events selected for prefiguration must be such as are confessed to be the most important and eventful. Secondly, that the figuring emblems must be, in some approved consistent sense, characteristic and distinctive. Such would be the case were a mastermind among men to develop the great general subject in a series of descriptive sketches or pictures. How, then, can we suppose it to be otherwise in the prefiguration authored by the omniscient Spirit? The direct evidence of truth hence arising, in case of agreement between the symbol and the historical object it is applied to, will at once be felt by the intelligent reader, and being not expounded after the interpreter's own fancy, that being too often a prophetic exposition, but in a sense, as I said, approved, that is, according to their recognized meaning, more especially at the time and in the country supposed to be referred to, or perhaps as otherwise fixed, e.g., by some local or geographical peculiarity, strongly marked in the prefiguration. Of course, the evidence will be felt strong in proportion to the number of details combined in the symbol, their distinctiveness of character, and the exactness of their application to the era and the subject. It might be expected a priori, and will be found, in fact, that in the long series of prophetic figurations there will be some more circumstantial, distinctive, and striking than others, and some indeed quite brief, and comparatively general in character. But the former will be found, I believe, much more frequent than the latter, and abundantly sufficient in frequency and strength to serve as effectual buttresses to the sacred building and to support its continuity unbroken. Nor will the seeker for truth fail to consider the argument cumulative in this case, and how, if in a long continuous series of prefiguration one and another, each in its precise order of time, be shown to have had its fulfillment, the strength of the evidence of truth thereby rapidly increase each step, indeed, with almost the rapidity of geometrical progression. Besides which direct evidence the reader will find offered from time to time in the ensuing exposition, a species of indirect evidence, hitherto unnoticed, I believe, of the nature of what I may call elusive contrast. Examples will best illustrate it, but I may thus briefly explain its nature. Supposing the great subject of the apocalyptic revelation to be the history in advance, in connection or in contrast, of Christ's faithful church and of the world, of the latter, either in its primary state of avowed heathenism or its subsequent state of corruption and apostasy under the Christian name, then, just as in God's actual interventions at one and another crisis for the revival of His church and vindication of His own rights and honor, the revelations of gospel light and truth made by Him would be necessarily in marked contrast and opposition to the then prevalent errors and corruptions. So in the Eternal Spirit's foreshowing of the same, a similarly marked contrast must be expected to appear. On putting the apocalyptic picturing of the heavenly revelation side by side with the historic picturing of the chronologically correspondent corruption and heresy, the same also, partially, in the Spirit's prefiguration sketching, from time to time, of its faithful ones, faithful among the faithless. Some 3 or 4 examples of this will be substantiated, if I mistake not, in the ensuing commentary, especially in Revelation 7, 8, and 10, the view of St. John in his representative character, hitherto quite barren of results, furnishing under this head, as well as under the former, most important accessions of evidence. Nor let me pass on without just hinting the theological importance of each such substantiated elusive prefiguration, inasmuch as it must not merely present evidence of the fulfillment of prophecy in matters of historic fact, but evidence of the divine judgment in matters of religious doctrine. With regard to the plan, order, and chief divisions of the exposition ensuing, they have already been almost intimated in the preceding chapter, for that which an expositor may have declared to be in his opinion the most natural plan, order, and chief divisions of the prophecy, those self-same, except for very cogent reasons, he ought of course to follow out in his own exposition. Accordingly, the 3 septenaries of seals, trumpets, and vials will be interpreted by me as all connected and consecutive series, the 7th seal unfolding itself in the 7th trumpet visions, the 7th trumpet in those of the 7 vials, and this with no intermission or interruption, save only that of the supplemental retrogressive part, marked as such by clear internal evidence, which I suppose to have occupied the outside of the apocalyptic scroll. Hitherto this scheme of arrangement has not, I believe, been consistently developed. There are some expositors who, through admitting the conclusiveness of the 3 septenaries, have yet encumbered its development by the surely strained supposition of the 7-sealed book containing but a part of the revelation, and its other and larger part being inscribed in the little book held by the rainbow-crowned angel of Revelation 10. Others again have explained the witness's death and resurrection, noted apocalyptically under the 6th trumpet, as having reference to events long subsequent to those which are the main subject of that trumpet, and indeed to the sounding of the seventh trumpet after it, hence an involved structure at best, with a proportional want of the self-evidence of the simplicity of truth. And turning from the prophecy to the history, there seem to me on the whole to be 6 chief parts, or acts, clearly defined in the sacred drama prefigured before us. A division well agreeing with that more obvious one already noted, of the succession of the seals, trumpets, and vials, their historic subject matter being, respectively, as follows. 1. That of the coming temporary prosperity and then the decline and fall of pagan Rome, before the power of Christianity, the subject of the first 6 seals. 2. The ravage and destruction of Rome Christian, after its apostasy, in its divisions, both of East and West, of the Western Empire by the Goths, of the Eastern by the Saracens and Turks, the subject of the first 6 trumpets. 3. The history of the Reformation, as introduced about the middle of the 6th trumpet. 4. The supplemental and explanatory history of the rise, character, acting of the papacy and papal empire, which sprung out of the Gothic inundations of Western Europe, a part corresponding, as I conceive, with the writing without the prophetic scroll, and which was exhibited preparatory to the prefiguration of the papal overthrow. 5. The preliminary judgments on, and then the overthrow of, the papacy and papal empire, under the outpouring of the vials of God's wrath, followed by the coming of Christ in judgment, consequent on which is depicted. 6. The glorious consummation, including the reign of Christ and his saints on the renovated earth, and then the descent of the heavenly Jerusalem, of which parts the first 4 seem to me to have been accomplished already, and the 5th, the prefigured events, to be now well advanced in progress of fulfillment. In the following treatise it is my purpose, first, to trace the historical fulfillment of the 4 former parts, together with that of the first 6 vials of the 5th part, more at length then, in regard of the remainder, as yet unfulfilled, to inquire briefly and cautiously into the grander and more prominent points that may seem prefigured in it, as destined to take place in the coming future, the circumstance of the 5th prophetic division having been only in main part fulfilled, as I view it, in part still future, will cause this measure of divergence in my actual arrangement from the division just sketched, that I shall include what seems to me unfulfilled of the 5th part under the 6th and last of the prophecy. But what a field for the historic research lies here before us, a field extending over 17 centuries, and over countries many more than those of European Christendom, with reference to which point, and ere I enter on the exposition, let me call upon the reader to admire with me the divine wisdom in so ordering things that, amidst the partial wreck that there has been of the literary records of some of the centuries here prefigured, and the original scarcity of those of others, especially of the earlier part of the dark Middle Ages, there should yet remain to us documentary evidence sufficient whereby to illustrate almost all of the events foreshown, and to evince the truth and accuracy of the prefiguration. And again, let me suggest it as a thing admirable, that he should have so overruled the intellectual tendencies of a mind like Gibbon's in these latter days, as to direct it to the development of the same period, and nearly the same subject, as the larger half of the apocalyptic prophecy. It is scarcely needful, I presume, to detail his peculiar qualifications as an illustrator and a witness. endowed as he was with the powers of research and memory very rare, and an absolute enthusiasm in his subject, such as precisely the best to fit him for searching out historic truth, even where most obscure, endowed too with a comprehensive view and philosophic sagacity, which led him, instinctively almost, to mark the relations of things, trace results to their causes, and amidst the multiplicity of details, to appreciate the real importance and grand bearing of events and epochs. Besides the being possessed of a turn of mind and imagination eminently dramatic and picturesque, such as to suggest a development of his general subject with no lack of dramatic unity of effect, and a grouping and painting of the details and graphic descriptions, that approach, as near almost as descriptive language can do, to the mode of exhibiting them here chosen, vis-a-vis, by actual pictures. Thus was the infidel Gibbon prepared to become unconsciously the best illustrator of no small part of the prophecy, that self-same heavenly prophecy which he has himself made the subject of a sneer. The absolute need of such a pioneer to apocalyptic interpretation has been well set forth by Michaelis in his sketch of the prerequisites for a proper apocalyptic expositor. Nor is there anyone that can so fully, as the expositor himself, appreciate the immense advantage derivable from his pioneering work. It is, however, an advantage in which the reader may also participate. Gibbon's work on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire offers him a book of reference easily accessible, and in secular history almost always to be depended upon, whereby himself to test the correctness of the historic views and statements propounded to him by the expositor. It will be my object to facilitate such reference. The use will soon appear.